Hi everyone, welcome back to another episode of Sustainability in the Sea. I'm so happy you're here. If you're new here, Sustainability in the Sea is a podcast that I've been hosting for a few years now. It's by ocean people for ocean people, and we talk about the most important ocean conservation issues, and we also interview change makers that I feel are building the future for the ocean that we need. So today I really want to talk about something important, but those of you watching this, whether it be on YouTube or on your phone, might notice we have a bit of a dramatic backdrop. And for those of you listening, the backdrop is a rainforest. I am in Malaysia, specifically on Gaya Island, which is off the coast of Malaysia mainland. I came here for a number of reasons that I'm going to talk about, but the focal point of this episode is how we can use ecotourism to fund ocean conservation. Some of you that work for nonprofits know, at least in the US, it's been a really rough year for funding. We've experienced severe funding cuts, and so I've been exploring different ways to secure long-term and durable funding for nonprofits that are doing the good work for ocean conservation. Specifically, I'm at Gaya Island Resort, and they have a model that I know I needed to share. So that's what this episode's gonna focus on. If you're an up and coming ocean conservationist and you also maybe work in ecotourism, or you love being a naturalist, or you're down to work with tourists, or you live in a community that has a big tourism industry, this might be the episode for you. So thanks for being here. Let's get into it. Welcome back to Sustainability and the Sea. Okay guys, you know that I live and work in Hawaii, and Hawaii is one of those places in the world that has a huge tourism industry. And specifically, the pendulum of tourism has overswung to be, in many cases, and I think many residents would call it over tourism. And at the same time, and especially before the pandemic, this pendulum swing was also compounded by irresponsible and sometimes disrespectful tourists. And that creates a severe division between a tourism economy and local communities. And so what I wanted to do was examine a case study in a place where that relationship isn't so degraded, to see how tourism could be used for channeling and propelling ocean conservation solutions forward. I'm at Gaya Island Resort. Gaya Island Resort is a small luxury hotel, they also call it boutique hotel, that is on an island that is just off the shore of Malaysia mainland. The parent company is called YTL Hotels. And Gaya Island Resort is really small compared to like what you would think of at like a very, very large, maybe beachfront resort in Hawaii or Miami. We're clearly here in the off season and there's maybe like 50 people here. But the thing that made me want to share this with you guys on this show is that they don't just have conservation programs. Conservation is embedded into every single part of the hotel model, the funding model, and the visitor experience. And I think that's where I was really put over the edge. And I'm gonna explain to you exactly how, giving 3 examples of conservation programs they have here. But I was really pushed over the edge because I felt like some hotels will greenwash, and some hotels will maybe have like some educational signage about the environment, or they'll have like someone come talk to their guests once a week. But this entire hotel is funding their own conservation programs with a team of 15 conservationists. These are marine biologists, terrestrial biologists. A lot of them have advanced degrees. The director of conservation here, Justin, has told me so much about how it began and how the vision that they have ahead. So let me just paint you a picture really quickly. We get off the jetty because we had to take a boat from the mainland. We get off the jetty and you're checking in at the lobby, and on the left side, and maybe I'll put a photo on this, on the left side, there is a schedule of the activities that are taking place. And every single one of those activities is surrounding conservation. Every single activity. That means that a guest can't really, unless you're just coming to hang out by the pool and sleep in your hotel room, a guest's options are all based around conservation. So we did all of them, by the way. We did all of them. And the first one was their mangrove program. The three are their mangrove program, their coral restoration program, and their sea turtle rehabilitation and conservation program. These are kind of the three areas that they're working in. They also have a wildlife center on property that is free and open to any guest. You can just go in and learn. They have daily nature walks out of the wildlife center where a naturalist will take you on a walk through the Borneo rainforest, which is what attracted me, and what has always attracted me to Borneo was seeing the rainforest here and the biodiversity that is seen across Malaysia and on Borneo. And they also have a marine center. So they have a wildlife center and a marine center. And the marine center is also free, open to any of the guests. You go in, you learn about their work, you see tanks with their coral fragments, you talk to a marine biologist that is at the marine center because you can ask questions, and you learn about the ocean environment and marine life that are seen in Borneo and specifically Gaya Island. So those two things are just on property. So you might be like, I'm not going to pay for any activities. You can still go learn about all of the environmental issues facing this area from the Wildlife and Marine Center. So now going back to their programs. So the first program is their mangrove program. So mangroves are, just to get everybody up to speed, especially if you don't live near an amazing mangrove forest, mangroves are on coastlines, and they are really visibly identifiable because of their giant roots that come out of the water. And these roots are habitat for baby fish, they're protective structures, and the mangroves can grow really, really, really large. And so in a lot of areas, especially near the tropics, or near the equator and in the tropics, so 0 to 30 degrees north and south, their mangrove forests are very common. And mangroves themselves are beautiful to look at, but they also are extremely protective to coastlines. So also in the tropics, you get hurricanes and tropical storms. And because mangroves have those really stable root systems and they have like large trees, they actually absorb a lot of the first wave of impact from extreme weather like hurricanes, tropical storms, or also, big waves and swells. And so they're a climate resilient solution that is nature-based. They're a great example of a nature-based climate solution. They're also a carbon sink, but we already know that. And so one thing that Gaya Island Resort offers is a kayaking tour through the mangrove forest. And we did this with a ton of other guests. There were like 12 people in our group. And the leader who was leading the tour was a marine biologist and expert on the conservation issues. And the entire tour was based around the value of mangroves, the importance of this specific forest, and also included education around the mangrove conservation and restoration program that Gaya Island Resort leads. So we passed a nursery where the resort is growing new mangroves. The nursery had a bunch of saplings that were about 4 years old, and they were sharing that they outplant them around 20 years, and they've been running the nursery or restoration program for about 10, and so they're halfway there. And the goal is to help contribute to these mangrove forests. Also, I failed to mention this at the beginning, but Gaya Island is in a marine park. It's actually the first marine park in all of Malaysia, and that means that these mangrove forests are protected, which is great. So the restoration work that they're doing is an add-on to the already protected old growth mangrove forests. Also on the property, as you're walking on like the sidewalks, there's another mangrove nursery, and that is where they'll be propagating seeds that are a month old, a few months old, and then they will put them out when they deem they're ready, a few years old. And we actually got a chance to not just see the nursery on the kayak tour, but also plant out some mangroves with the staff as guests and as ocean conservation storytellers, which was a really big honor. The cool thing about the activities, and we'll talk a little bit about this at the end, is that all of the revenue that comes from guests booking the mangrove kayak tour goes back to their conservation programs. So you're not just supporting conservation a little bit when you book, say, a hotel room. 100% of the cost of the activities based around conservation are going back to the future of the program. So that's mangroves. Okay, if a singular hotel I was staying at had that and I was a guest, I would be doing that so quick. Another cool thing was it was all of these activities are things you could do with like your parents or your friends that don't maybe necessarily care about conservation. It's like, let's go on a kayak tour. And it's like passively educating people. It's not in your face. It's not aggressive. It's not like only come on this if you're a marine biologist or an environmentalist. It's like actually just the backdrop of everything else they're doing. Okay, I think we should do coral planting next. So I mentioned there was a marine center, and the marine center has a aquarium tank that has coral restoration fragments before they're being ready to be outplanted. So if you're not familiar with the coral restoration process, it's different in different parts of the world, but the restoration economy for coral is growing rapidly. And one of the main methods is through microfragmentation. I actually interviewed Dr. David Vaughn, who is like the father of microfragmentation, on our podcast. And if you scroll far enough back, you'll be able to hear that conversation. But fragmentation is basically, corals are colonies, they're animals, and they're colonies of, it's kind of hard to explain, but essentially like if you cut it, it will grow faster. And you're not like harming the animal because they're colonial species. So they're all independent animals, if that makes sense. So microfragmentation is the process of cutting a coral so that it grows faster. And then you use that little piece and you grow it on a different substrate that then you're going to outplant to the ocean. So here at Gaya Island Resort, they are restoring both hard coral, mostly acropora, and soft coral. I have never met any organization that is restoring soft coral. Like, that was definitely the most exciting part for me. And they actually have a 100% survival rate of their soft coral, which is also crazy. But anyway, so you go into the Marine Center and you can see all the little fragments of all the different species of coral that they fragmented out from the parent colony or the source reef or the mother reef, and they're just growing there because they wait for it to grow to a certain degree before they feel as though it is ready to be outplanted. Okay. We participated also in the entire process of their coral restoration program. So we did it in separate batches, but we went to their marine center and we sat down with a marine biologist, Bata, who has carried the team all week. He literally has introduced us to all of his conservation staff, answered all of our relentless questions, which we know are annoying because we also are marine biologists, so they're super detailed. And he was just incredible. So Bata led our fragmenting experience, and we actually did soft corals. They use a different method for soft corals. They actually tie the soft coral down to the plug substrate. They're using plugs, something we use in Hawaii too. But they just tie it down with a thread until the soft coral connects to the plug, which is typically like a handful of weeks or maybe a month. And once it's connected, you don't really need the string anymore, and you can let it go and it's attached to the plug, and then it can just grow. And then it stays in the aquarium tank in the Marine Center until it gets big enough to be outplanted. So we prepped some new soft coral from the mother colony onto new plugs and put it back. I've also been sharing this entire process, specifically the coral restoration, sea turtles, and mangroves, on my social media. So definitely check that out if you want the visuals for this story. Then the next day, we ended up outplanting acropora, so hard coral fragments, out to their coral gardens, which is just offshore of the resort. So Bata brought over some frags that were ready to be outplanted. They've grown. They were probably, I don't know, one of them was like the size of my fist. They were clearly very well connected to the plug. And he also found a substrate rock that would have been easy for all of the different plugs to fit on. And for the substrate, obviously it's going to be all of the same species. And so he did his glue mixture, and we connected the frags to the substrate, and ultimately outplanted an entire marine rock of multiple different outplants that are going to ultimately grow and fuse together. We swam it out to the coral gardens, and we put it out and found it in a shallow, safe area that all of the other outplants are at. That part was actually really amazing because you could see the other restored corals that he's been working on for years. And it was really hard to tell that they were outplants. They had grown so much that they looked like they were just part of the reef. And what I love about where the restoration site is it's right next to the jetty where you have to board the boat to leave and arrive to Gaya Island Resort. And so when guests are like waiting for their boat, they're like looking over the pier and they just see the coral gardens that were restored. Okay, so you can actually pay as a guest to participate in an activity like this. Maybe they have frags ready, maybe they don't, but you get introduced to the coral restoration experience. You get paired with a marine biologist. It's private or small groups, and you can either fragment corals or you can participate in some of the outplanting process. And similar to the mangrove forest, all of the revenue from that activity that you pay the resort goes back to the conservation fund to buy the materials and support the experts that are working to restore corals around this island that is within a marine park. Let me not fail to emphasize that doing restoration within protected areas is one of the best and most efficient uses of our time, because a lot of the upstream and stressors that maybe cause degradation in the first place are at least partially being mitigated by the marine park protections. Isn't that amazing? Like, could you imagine us going on vacations, like with our best friends, with our family, and doing like a coral restoration activity, having it be so easy and so accessible and so supportive of the local programs, and you get to meet the experts, and it was just so magnificent. And I am so glad that we were able to be part of it. Okay, the third program was definitely Alex's favorite. Might have been mine. Some of you may know this. I think we've talked about it in previous episodes, but me and Alex got our graduate degrees in marine got our graduate degrees in marine science, but we also both have had experience working with sea turtles. So I was working for an animal response and rescue nonprofit organization in Hawaii for a number of years. The animal rescue org focused on sea turtles, seabirds, and seals. And then Alex, when he was an undergrad, he actually did a research opportunity on Hawaii Island to help track and monitor the endangered population of sea turtles that was known at Black's Beach. So both of me and him love sea turtles. We have participated in efforts that have helped to ideally recover their populations, and we both don't do that anymore. And I miss it. Of course I miss it. I loved working with animals. I obviously found my way to marine biology because I love animals and I love nature. And so to learn about this program where they're rehabilitating sea turtles on property just brought me back to all of the reasons why I wanted to work in animal rescue in the first place and why I wanted to do wildlife conservation and marine life conservation. And so they have actually been running their sea turtle rehab center for over 10 years. It's basically at the Marine Center. So if you're going and visiting the Marine Center, you'll see some of the basic facilities. And then they also have like a sea pen that's a little bit offshore where they keep patients that are maybe getting closer to being able to be released. And you can go and visit those patients as well. So they have these things called turtle talks where they'll allow you to go to the sea pen with a marine biologist and a naturalist who will explain to you the stories of the patients and also allow you to see them, and it will be during feeding time. And so they'll go out, they feed them once a day. So they'll have a turtle talk once a day, which means that a guest definitely has an opportunity to go see the sea turtle patients and also participate in a turtle talk during their time here. And they'll get all their questions answered and kind of see them up close and personal. That is entirely free. I love that they have the free and paid options and at request is I think the third. So it's free, paid, and then at request, or if the timing is right. And that means that, like, you know, we were at the turtle talk yesterday meeting the patients, and like all these people who have never even heard of sea turtle rehabilitation were there. And it's like, that's how we create new ocean conservationists. Like, we got to bring them to the place. And so right now there are 3 patients. And I learned a lot about them as a rehab center. So they have a relationship with the Department of Wildlife, the government agency that manages wildlife and natural resources. And because there's rehabilitation center has been established for nearly a decade now, or over a decade, the wildlife department actually calls them a lot and says, you know, we have a sea turtle that's on like the other side of Malaysia and we're going to bring it to you, or on the other side of Borneo. And that's takes a lot to develop that type of trust with government partners. So I mentioned they have 3, and they actually had one sea turtle patient that they had for over 4 years. They called him COVID because he came during COVID. But the 2 at the Turtle Talk that are getting closer to being released have been here for about 4 months. So they have the capacity to take a patient for years or to take a patient for just a few months. And that all depends on the condition and the assessment that's done by the wildlife veterinarian that they have on staff, and all of the details that come from that level of like expertise. They also, while we were here, just received a new patient. This sea turtle, who we got to meet, they didn't have a name yet, was an adult male. They estimate about to be 30 years old. And he was found stranded nearby. And he is extremely, he's not emaciated, but they believe he's dehydrated, and they haven't seen him have a bowel movement. So they believe that there could be an intestinal blockage. They're not sure what it could be right now, but we were able to shadow the initial assessment by the conservation team and the wildlife vet, and they were doing it right outside the Marine Center. So what was so magical about this, and I don't know about you guys, but like I just could never see certain areas or certain people I've like worked with or heard of like do this, but they were just doing the assessment out there. So guests were able to come up, learn, observe, as long as they were quiet and respectful and just taking photos and giving space. Just observe the entire experience. And that was also probably really memorable for the kids that were there. And so they did an initial assessment on the sea turtle. They transported him to a larger tank. We watched him get IV fluids to support with dehydration, a vitamin, which they use to encourage appetite to see if he's going to eat, and then also an antibiotic. And all of those things were administered right at the Marine Center. They have the facilities, and you can actually watch it right there. And so the main thing that I learned about was that all of the paid activities associated with any of these 3 programs, so I would call the paid activities like hiking through the mangroves, doing a small group coral planting experience, or what was the other one? The Turtle Talks are free. So just those 2, and then anything else that they have that is related to conservation. Planting mangroves, that was the other one. You can work one-on-one with a marine biologist to plant the mangroves to propagate out and contribute to their nursery. All of the money from this goes to a Gaya Island Resort conservation fund. And the conservation fund grows, and the conservation team and leadership determines what it's going to go towards next. So at the sea turtle assessment for the new patient, the director of conservation and the wildlife vet shared with me that their goal is to get a mobile x-ray to be able to conduct on sea turtle patients going forward, especially because they have all this authority within the regional space with rehab. They know they're going to get more sea turtle patients in the future. They want to be prepared. They want to make sure that they can handle whatever situation comes on their shores. And I thought that was really cool to know that the conservation team has an entire plan. The other element of this is I mentioned that the conservation team was 15 people. Every single person I met was an expert. This is not someone who has taken a naturalist exam. Many of them have specialized in marine biology or terrestrial wildlife biology. They have worked in conservation for years and years and years. I talked to many of them about their graduate work and the research that they've conducted. Some of them are sharks and rays experts. Some of them are coral biodiversity or coral survey experts and monitoring. Some of them work in terrestrial wildlife at the interface of land and sea. And all of them have such a well-rounded understanding of the wildlife threats, solutions, issues, and landscape on land in Borneo and Gaya Island and in sea. And I think that that format and structure allows guests to go as deep as they want on these issues, so that when you have someone like me or Alex coming here asking you these intricate questions, they always have an answer. And they want to talk about it because it's their life's work, the same way it's all of our life work. And I noticed that was really special, and it really stood out to me from other, maybe ecotourism hotels that like to use words like sustainability and ecotourism, I've been working to examine the ways that tourism and models like these can help scale conservation. And so I got a chance to talk to the director of the conservation program, Justin, and they don't have to worry about when the next grant is coming. Yeah, sure, they apply for grants, they have partnerships with the government, they fundraise in other ways, but they have a level of baseline and foundational investment through the resort's business model. They know when the high season is. They know when the low season is. They know that these guests are going to contribute in these ways. And so it alleviates the leadership of the conservation team from having to go and source all of that funding, to a degree, of course. But I just think about all of the founders and executive directors that have to spend so much of their time in Hawaii and in the US and around the world talking to philanthropists, working on grant reports, working on writing new proposals, building new partnerships that just to give them a few $100s or a few $1,000s. And this model frees up so much time for leadership to focus on doing the actual work. And that is just something I wish for every single nonprofit. And so as someone who lives in Hawaii and has always been skeptical of the ways that hotels run and the ways that they are actually giving back to local communities, it was really refreshing to learn the intricacies and the details of the way it's done here and the way that they are contributing to the better future by being part of conservation leadership, independent from just hosting guests at the hotel. It's not about the guest experience entirely. It's about the conservation goals they've set for themselves and guests just to get to be part of it. And that's, I think, the difference. And it's something that we should carry on. And so those of you that work in partnerships, in fundraising, in growing nonprofits, for those of you that I know are going to be founders of nonprofits, be open to models like this, because I see the pros and cons and I'm watching the benefits while I'm here. That's honestly all I had. I just wanted you guys to understand how Gaya Island Resort is giving back to Gaya Island and Borneo, and how we as guests visiting and seeing this place that is built around nature is contributing to that. Thanks for being here. Thanks for always listening to Sustainability in the Sea. I love you guys, and I'll see you in the next episode.